Hi everybody, it's me, Susan Holt. I'm an artist. Welcome to my Sunday evening live. I have my phone situated so that I can see you because tonight we're doing a Q&A session. I don't know how long it'll take, and so I don't know when people are going to join. So I'll be here puttering around until somebody pops up into the comments with a question. I see that my husband has just joined the call. Hi, honey. So, for those of you who are on here later, or watching this afterwards, if you see somebody named Chris Kurtz comment, that is my husband. Yes, we have last names that are different, but we know we're married. So yeah, let's see. Till other people show up, I'll give you a quick little look around. This is the canvas that I poured live last week. See if I can get it in frame. So that's the piece from last week that we did. I asked for help with colors, and I'll post a picture of it once I get the dot mandala on it. But yeah, it came out really, really nice. I really like how the light green color came through because it really made the cells of the blue stand out more, and they are more outlined with that lighter green, and I really like how that happened. Something I've been working on this week is a mandala that I drew back in 2017, and I've been adding color to it. I'm using purple, orange, and red. Only got these last two little lines to go. This is one of the first ones I drew, and you can see I got it right here a little too close to the edge. So that'll have to be framed in a flat frame, probably without a mat. Just kind of smushed in there by whoever purchases that one. But yeah, other than that, just waiting for everybody to join. I should have prepared something to say while waiting for people, but I did not. Chris, do you have any questions while we're waiting for everybody else to join? That you may not know the answer to, even though you live here? I'm playing with the settings right now. Okay. Trying to get everything lined up. So while we are waiting for other people to join, I'm going to put my phone on a different stand. Oh, hello. And I will work on this mandala a little bit more. There we go. Get you up there nice and high. Swap out my reading glasses for the higher powered ones. So as you can see, I'm coloring on the back of a pad of art paper. And that's because this table has a really rough surface, And this paper also has a really rough surface. So if I don't put it on this smoother piece of cardboard, then I will get very light sketchy lines with my colored pencils, my Prismacolor pencils. And I want the color to be saturated, nice and deep. So as you can see, it doesn't have very many little white flecks in it. There are some white flecks that are still in there, but that's because, like I said, the paper is very textured. I honestly don't even remember where I got this paper from at this point. It's been so long, so who knows? Okay. Well, here we go. I do like to start with a sharper point on my colored pencils, especially when I'm doing designs that have very square or very narrow points to them. That way I can get into those corners without bleeding it over into the next design element. After that, I can color in pretty well whatever I want. And then I take my brush and I get rid of all of the colored pencil part that comes off. And that's because I don't want to use my hand. I don't want my heat of my hand to melt the colored dust and then smear it across the page. And I don't want the oils on my hands to seep into the paper and that way make it possibly repel the color that I put down. That's not what I'm going for. Going for nice, saturated color. There we go. Let's see. So my Facebook group here that I'm on is called Chaos and Order. And another friend of mine, Epal, came up with that name for that term for the art I do. I should say the art I make. The pour paintings with the dot mandalas. The pour paintings are the chaos and the dot mandalas are the order in those paintings. Then with these drawn mandalas, I think the chaos is when I have been drawing on them for a while and I don't quite know what to put on them next. That's a pretty chaotic moment in my mind, but they always turn out. I did this week draw a mandala that is on 22 by 22 inch paper, and the mandala itself is 18 inches and it is absolutely huge. Here it is. As you can see, it takes up my whole little desk space that I have. I have not figured out what colors I want to use on it yet, or if I want to use all of the colors on it or not. So we'll see what happens with that in the future. It should be pretty fun to color on. This one. Just deciding which color to use next on here. When I turn the page, I'm turning it so that I can get the best angle for my hand to go. Human hands like to go left to right or right to left. And we kind of make an arc when we move. Our elbow is kind of that pivot point in the, just like in the center of a mandala when you're using a compass. So I turn my page so that I can get my hand to move as it does naturally for the next spot I color, instead of trying to force it to move up and down or back and forth, which it does not do super naturally. And I know that's when I get wiggly lines, is when I try to force it to do something going back and forth instead of left to right. So I turn my page, and I make sure on the back end over here that it's not hanging too far off of the sketch pad, because I don't want it to have a crease in it down on that side. And as you can see, I keep flipping my pencil and turning it, and that's because when you use a colored pencil, you make one side of it flat, and if you want a nice straight line like this, or to get into the corners, you have to turn it to where there's a point, and you will see on your own pencils that there are little points that pop up. So I just use those sharp little pokey points to do the detailed work in the corners, and then I use the rest of the pencil to fill it in. I have my handy dandy pencil sharpener. One thing about pencil sharpeners with art pencils is I never sharpen it to a super fine sharp tip. This still has some roundedness to it, because if I push on it to get the kind of depth of color that I want in here, a very fine sharp point is going to break. I like to use a little handheld school type pencil sharpener that is not mechanical and is not one of the crank grind kinds that we used to have in classrooms when I was a kid. I don't know what kind of pencil sharpeners they have in classrooms these days. I'm assuming it's still the crank kind, but I don't know. But I like these little handheld models. They're inexpensive. If I need to buy a new one, I buy a new one. They do get dull after a while, and I can really tailor how fine of a point I put on this, so I have much more control. Also, with the grind pencil sharpeners and the electric pencil sharpeners, they tend to take off too much of your pencil that you're working with, and with these Prismacolors and any other art colored pencil that you're using, the lead or the colored part in here is a lot softer than in regular #2 yellow pencils that you would take to school for exams or learning to write. So the higher powered pencil sharpeners will actually just keep eating down your pencil. And this, you can really tell how much you've taken off by feel. You can feel it in your fingertips. Well, I can feel it in my fingertips. So if I just want to take a little bit off, literally a quarter turn, I can take just enough off to get this point sharp enough for me to get into a corner again. And with an electric pencil sharpener or with a hand crank grinding type pencil sharpener, I could not get that fine a point on it that quickly. So I don't really think there's a need to go for a big fancy schmancy pencil sharpener. And this doesn't take batteries that end up in the landfill, so I'm all for that. I did recently have to buy a new pencil sharpener. This one is, it's probably about a year old now. But the other pencil sharpener I had since I went to college the last time, I graduated in 2005 with my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and I was going to school for a few years before that. And that's when I bought the last little pencil sharpener like this that I had. Was probably in 2002. So it had a nice, good long life. Like I said, I just bought this one last year, so it lasted me for well over a decade. So bang for the buck, I'm always going to go for these little school pencil sharpeners. There are also pencil sharpeners out there at art supply stores that have different size of holes in it. Also, you can find them at craft stores. They have different size of holes in them. And that's because some of these pencils come in different, what's the word? Shoot. Diameters. Excellent. Well, hello, Jennifer. Welcome. Jennifer asks, which art class or teacher challenged you the most? Math challenged me the most, but that's not an art class. Challenged me the most. I don't know. That's a really good question. Most of the art classes I really have loved. In college, it was probably the clay and glazes formulation classes. We had to use this outdated computer program to formulate new clays and new glazes, one per each class, and it involved some math, and it involved a lot of trial and error out in the real world, which I liked that part. But I didn't like the computer part. I didn't like the math part. I did very much like the part where some of the recipes some of my classmates came up with could not actually be practically tested, because a lot of the components of glazes, if you put the wrong components together, your kiln will explode. So I'm glad that we had a professor who knew which chemicals could not go together, even if that's what the program asked for us to do. Excellent question, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that one. That was a really good question. Boy, that one made me think. Oh, another thing that challenged me in college, besides working on group projects, do not like group projects, was in what was it? It was my 3D sculpture class. That was a prerequisite that I had to take. And the assignment was to go to one of the places in town that has kind of metal for the pound, and we had to pick out some items to make into a sculpture. So I picked out about 5 pieces, and I really only used 3 of them, put them together, and the sculpture sits at my house today, still. But I was not warned that we needed to have a title for the piece and a story for the piece. So I just showed up in class with the piece, as ready as I thought I needed to be for critiques. And we had my piece first for critiques because it was outside. Everybody else had theirs inside. So my piece has a large round part at the top. It's a lathe part, and it's got 3 pieces that come into it and center something in the middle of it for a metal lathe, so that whatever piece the machinist is working on spins precisely. The next piece is a piece of what looks like industrial-sized bike chain, and it had a bolt at the end, so I put that into the center, screwed everything down, made that fastener nice and tight. And then the third piece is a bin on the bottom, a metal bin that's just used for parts bins and a lot of like auto supply stores or mechanic shops, or were at least back in the day. So it looks like the chain is spilling out into the bin. And I put this piece together the afternoon before because I didn't want to think about it. I wanted to think about other classes that I was taking at the time. So I literally put it together the day before. So show up to class with this thing. Set it up outside because it's rusty and it's kind of gross and I didn't want to bring it inside. And the main part is sitting up on a wall. Everything else is down on the floor, flowing down onto the floor. And the TA who was teaching the class brings everybody out. And he was a really cool guy. And he says, "All right, Susan, tell us the name of your piece." And my brain went, what? Nobody ever said that we needed to name these darn things. So, and my brain also added a few curse words in there. But, you know, it was what it was. So I went ahead and did some pretty quick thinking. And I said, right, this piece is called The Conquistador Standing Before the Fountain of Youth. Because it looked kind of like a fountain with that industrial chain flowing down into the bin. So the professor says, great. That's an interesting name for that piece. And he says, okay, class, what do we think about the Conquistador? And I said, oh, no. That is not the Conquistador. and I left it. I just stopped talking. So one of the guys who wasn't getting a very good grade in class, standing at the back, and it was literally a 3 count. And no one had heard him talk in class before. All of a sudden goes, "Dudes, we're the conquistadors." And the crowd went wild. There were gasps of awe for this thing that I had put together the night before. And earlier, the TA for the class said, okay, we only have 5 minutes per piece, so we can get through everyone's pieces today. Well, he started asking me questions about the piece, and I was like, oh no, I don't have anything prepared. Thank goodness that I have a pretty quick wit and can pull history out of my brain when I have to. So I went into how the piece at the top was the sacred native lands and the people and their religions, and the 3 spikes that were piercing into it were that of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit of Catholicism and Christianity, and the chain, the rusty chain that was coming out of the center of that was the blood that was shed of the native peoples through both war, famine, and disease. Oh, I went there with it. Inside my head, I could not believe that they were asking me question after question after question. And 20 minutes later, the PA finally says, okay, I'm sorry to cut this off, but we've spent way more than 5 minutes on your piece. So everybody else only gets 2 minutes. So let's go ahead and go inside. So we go inside, and one of the other young ladies in class, I was in my 30s at this point, so I was the oldest person in class because I was a returning adult student. But one of the other young ladies in class, we get to her piece, and people aren't as excited by it as they were with my piece, because she had a title. Nobody remembers what it was. I certainly don't remember what it was. And her piece was fine, but it was really jumbled and cluttered. So she starts going on about how, Susan only had 3 pieces of crap, literally called it crap, in her sculpture, and I did so much more work, and it looks like she just threw it together the day before. And this is when I went and put my hand to my chest and feigned like I was really insulted. And the PA, who I adore this man to this day, the PA says to her, well, maybe if you would learn to edit, your piece would get better reviews. And he turned around, started walking away, and said, right, next piece. So even though I was challenged to put those pieces together, I got an A on it. So I'm very, very happy with it. And I love the piece, and I love the story behind the piece. And to further the story, my younger sister, when she was working on her PhD in geophysics, because she is the science mathematical brain of the family, called me and said, I'm having trouble coming up with some stuff for my PhD. And I said, let me tell you a story. So I told her the story of the conquistador standing before the fountain of youth. And she stopped at the end and said, okay, I see. So what you're telling me is that I should BS my way through part of this. And I said, yes, absolutely. So in my family, we do not call it BSing it. We call it conquistadoring the heck out of it. All right. That was a great question, Jennifer. Does anybody else have any questions for me? Or Jennifer, do you have another question for me? I'll pick this up and see if they're... Hi, I'm going to scroll down. Oh. So I don't see any other questions yet, but Jennifer is responding with ROFL, rolling on the floor laughing. Yeah. That's kind of what we all did. Was roll on the floor laughing at this poor gal who, worked really hard on her piece, and I did not. Hi, Diana. How are you? Diana's question is, how is your arm/hand holding up? It's doing really well today. Diana is a friend. She was over yesterday, and I had a cramp in my hand from drawing that larger mandala I showed you earlier in the video. But it worked itself out overnight, so I have spent the day on this piece. So thank you for asking. It's doing much better. Jennifer asks, where was your favorite place to go in the U.S. and internationally? Let's take the U.S. first. When I was young, my dad was a civil engineer, and we moved around every couple of years. I lived in Colorado, Alaska, Oregon, and Arizona with my parents, and then on my own, I have lived in Washington State and Oregon and Colorado and back here in Arizona. My most favorite place I have been in the U.S. is actually Alaska. My husband and I have also gone to Hawaii for one of his work trips. I was lucky enough to get to go along and spend the week he spent working in the hotel and talking to a local artist and taking art photos because they had a huge display of paintings, which was fantastic. But my favorite place to be in the U.S. is Alaska. There is absolutely nowhere else like it. The sights are beautiful. Everything smells like a cedar forest that's been misted with dew magically. And then you also sometimes get that waft of ocean that comes in, and it is just breathtaking. All of it is breathtaking. School, when I was there, I was in 6th grade. I did not like school. It was not breathtaking. But I did enjoy science class because we got to go out on the beach at low tide one day, and we got to go into the tide pools and pull out things for the fish tank in the lobby of the school for the year. So there were these little shell things. I don't know what they're called scientifically, but when I was little, they were called Chinaman's hats because they kind of have that conical shape and they're kind of purpley. Yeah, so we pulled those out. We pulled out some sea snails. There was some small fish we put in there, and there was a tiny octopus. And the octopus ended up eating the tiny fish. Go octopus. And the first day we got it into the tank in school. Yeah, we got back from the field trip, put it in the tank, and the tank was pitch black for a day and a half while the filter worked to filter out all the ink from it. So that was the best time I had in school up there. But my neighbor also had a fishing dock. Well, okay. So our neighbor's house was actually not a house. It was the forest ranger station, and we were out on the water. So the neighbor beyond that had a fishing dock. And the rule was, I was 12, my sister was 10 and a half 10? 9.5 or 10. And the rule on the fishing dock was, if you see a shark, just keep an eye on it. But if you see a killer whale, get off the dock because they will come up out of the water and take you. I also had a dog when I was up there. My sister had a cat when she was up there. And the dog would come out on the dock with us, but he was terrified of the water. So when he fell in, we had to actually just pull him out. So yeah, Alaska was fantastic. And then before that, we had gone a couple years before with my dad up to Alaska for a vacation. We were there for a couple weeks, a month, I don't know. But we got to meet relatives that we hadn't met before then because they were up there. We got to do things like take rice paper out to some of the petroglyphs and take the ferns and do fern rubbings. We got to walk into the forests. We got to see in Ketchikan, there's a Native American center there. I don't know which tribe it is anymore because that was like 40 years ago. But I fell in love with totem poles and First Nations, Native American art from that region right then and there. It was an instant connection. Their pieces are so well carved and crafted, and they're so graphic. And my favorite stories, of course, are the stories of the Raven, the trickster. He is one of my faves. Okay. The next part of that question is, where was my favorite place to go internationally? I've been to Mexico a couple of times. It did not spark interest in my soul like Alaska did. I have been to England a few times, and I have been to France a couple of times. Other than that, I am sadly not as world travel. I'm not a world traveler like I would like to be. But hopefully I will become a rich, famous artist one day, and then I can go on all the adventures I want. So I think that my favorite place to go internationally are places I probably haven't been to and discovered yet. Great question. Anybody else have a question? I know Jennifer has a list of questions. So bring me up some other questions, Jennifer or anybody else. I'm going to color while I do that. I did like France. I did like England. I like England a lot because I don't have to learn another language, and I don't. So when I was younger, I was going to be a French interpreter, but that all got put on hold when I reached French classes at college and realized that I really suck at conjugating verbs in another language. So that didn't happen. So that's when I started my degree in art. Okay, next question is, pick a piece and tell us what it means to you. She says, Conquistador Live. I just talked about the Conquistador piece. Let's see. Oh, so today on this group, I posted a picture of giclée prints of the sea turtle and the sun bear. The sea turtle is one that I am going to keep forever because it means something to me. So you can go back and look at that post because it's up there on my wall on the other side of all the tables. But the sea turtle means something to me because when I went back to college. I was up at Glendale Community College for a couple of years before I transferred over to ASU to finish my degree. And I took a watercolor painting class. And I wasn't really getting the knack of splashing color on the page and making it turn into flowers. It was pissing me off. So I was kind of angry in class all the time. And the teacher was about to send us all home on spring break. So she was telling the students in class, you can work on a full sheet of watercolor paper, but you can't. I want you to work smaller still. And I was told that I couldn't work on a full sheet of watercolor paper, which is something like 24 by 30 inches. Those are not the exact measurements, and if they are, it's a fluke that I remembered them. But that made me really, really mad. And I knew I was a better artist than what those little watercolor flowers she was trying to get me to paint were telling her. So I got ticked off. I got home and I went through my photos of when my husband and I went for our honeymoon. We went to San Diego, so we visited the zoo and SeaWorld and the wildlife park and all that kind of good stuff. So I went through all my photos and I found a picture of this little sea turtle. I really liked the picture, so I decided, what the heck? I am going to paint this sea turtle on a full sheet of watercolor paper. I'm going to take the entire week to do it. I'm going to make it as perfect as I can, and I'm going to bring it in to show her what I did for homework over spring break. So I walked into class with this full page watercolor painting, and I took it out of my carrying case and I had it covered up. Teacher comes over and she says, I thought I told you to not go full sheet yet. And I said, yeah, you did. But I figured out what the problem was, and that was I don't like making the flowers, painting the flowers how you want people to paint the flowers. So I went ahead and did my own thing. And she said, fine, what did you do? And I opened it up and she looked at it and said, wow, you can go full sheet any day. So that made me very happy. And I was like, yes, I can. And I knew I could go full sheet because I had already been working full sheet with some other art at that point. I was doing some calligraphy and medieval illumination for a group that I used to be part of. And some of the awards they wanted were full sheet, so I knew I could go full sheet, just not in her style. I had to do it in my style. I had to do it my way, and that's the best way for an artist to do something. It's very Frank Sinatra of us all. All right. How about another question? I'll sit here and do some coloring and pander to the camera so you have time to type it in. By the way, Jennifer, these are really great questions. Thank you so much for asking them. And not to say Diana's question wasn't great. It was lovely. Thank you. Okay, new question. Jennifer again. What brand of flow medium do you like best, and does it make a difference? So she's talking about when I make my pour paintings. Here's one that's just about ready to have the dot mandala put on it. It's dry enough to do that now. So with pour paintings, there are several different recipes people can use to get the results that they want. I have been using Flow Aid in all of my paints, but I've actually been using Flow Aid in all of my paints for years. This includes not only my acrylic paints for the pour paintings, but also my watercolor paints and my gouache paints. For those of you who don't know what gouache paints are, they are basically an opaque version of watercolor paints. So they are not transparent, they are not see-through, they have more pigment in them. What Flow Aid does is it makes the pigments not stick to each other in the tube or in the water solution, so that your paints are much easier to use. They're a lot smoother in texture when you use them. With any product like Flow Aid or like pouring medium, you want to read the instructions on the bottle from the manufacturer before you use them. There are percentages of what to use for different kinds of paints, different kinds of pours, and you're also going to have to use water until your paints flow a very particular way. Then if you want your paint to be a little looser or a little thicker for certain things and certain pours, you have to factor that in as well. There are also, I keep saying also a lot, I just realized that, there are recipes out there that have Elmer's school glue in them, and I don't use that. Not because I have anything against Elmer's school glue. I quite like it when I make enrichment toys for shelter dogs and cats. But I don't, as a professional artist, I don't want to use that technique because I don't know what it's going to do to the light fastness of the paint, how it's going to adhere to the canvas, and it just kind of freaks me out. So I haven't even tried that technique. But there's also a lot of other different mediums you can add to your paint to pour paint with. I just happen to like the two that I showed you. And if people use silicone in their paints, they tell you to wash your paint after it's dry, or wash your painting after it's dry, which involves a very soft paper towel and some watered down dish soap. It's blue. You see it on the commercial with ducklings and oil. And gently rub the surface of your art. So I have stopped putting silicone in my pour paint for pour paintings. Not because I don't think it gives a great effect, because it does, but because I am lazy and I do not want to wash my paintings. And I need to have a silicone-free surface to put the dot mandalas on top of them. All right, get ready for your next question, Jennifer. Go ahead and start typing it in. Or anybody else who has any questions. So if you watch a lot of pour painting YouTubes, there are people who use different pour mediums than I do, and that is perfectly valid and perfectly fine. I use the ones I like. Some people also use exterior latex house paint for some of their pours, and I do not, because I am allergic to latex. Okay, next question from Miss Jennifer is, how do you define art? So Jennifer's kids called me last week and wanted to know if basketball was art. After about 20 minutes of saying no in different ways, because her kids are very smart, I can definitely say that I do not define basketball as art. However, art is a creative process. Results in creative art pieces that people can enjoy or dislike or talk about. But I think it all boils down to it's something that has to be created. I was a docent for the Phoenix Art Museum for a few years, and I didn't like all the art that they had there. I learned to appreciate all of the art they had there. But yeah, there was some of it where even after I had researched it, and I'm not talking about doing a Google search, I'm talking about going in and going into the art library they have there at the museum, going into the library, into the Phoenix Downtown Library, going and doing actual research. I found that some of those pieces I did not like, even after researching them, but I did appreciate them, and I did appreciate the work and the effort it took to create them. So I think it's a combination of work and skill, and sometimes artists are not known for being particularly skilled at one thing. And some are, but there is always skill involved. Sometimes it doesn't look like there's skill involved, but there usually is. But I think it's anything that you create and put out in the world. Writing is an art. Coding is not necessarily an art, but it can create art, like video game art. So the video game and the art in it is the end product. That is the art. The code itself is not art. As Jennifer's husband says, code can be elegant. I have never coded anything in my life, so I will actually take his word for that. Art can be elegant as well, but yeah, art is not basketball. Basketball is not art. Basketball is a game. Next question, please. If anybody has one. That was really not an eloquent way to answer that question, but it's the best I got right now. Next question from Jennifer is, who is my favorite artist? I have a few different favorite artists for different reasons. Going back to when I did the calligraphy and illumination, I really like Christine de Pizan. She was a calligrapher, a painter, and a storyteller from back in the, I think she was 1200s. It's been a while since I've had to look her up. But she had her husband die on her somehow. I don't remember that part of the story either. She was widowed and had to make a living for herself and her children, and became one of the most famous calligraphers and illuminators of her day. So that is inspirational, that she was able to break into something that was such a boys' club at the time and become so powerful. She made books and poetry for kings and princes. So she's a good one. If we're talking Impressionism, I really love Monet with his water lilies and his paintings from his house at Giverny, France. If we're talking wallpaper, William Morris, he's always a good one. I actually use not his designs, but the theory of his designs kind of weaving and shaping into each other in some of my current mandalas that I've been drawing. Let's see. I also like Lalique glass. It's very interesting. I like Lalique very much. Fabergé eggs, of course, if we're talking jewels. If we are talking about artists who are alive today, my friend E. Paul creates a lot of things. He is not creating at the moment. He is on a walkabout, a world tour, and his gem carvings and his copper work is bar none, top of the line, amazing. Another modern artist I like is my friend Daniel, and he does monster paintings and drawings, and we have several of them here at the house. My craft goddess print is actually up on the wall here in my studio. That is from him. My friend Jennifer, she does beautiful lace. She just finished 4 yards of handmade lace for another friend. I'm not overly fond of a lot of the big name artists in the 19th and 20th centuries. I'm not a fan of Warhol. I'm not a fan of Jackson Pollock. I appreciate their work. I understand their messages from it. I don't like Picasso. I do not like Picasso. I'm not a fan of Gauguin. Just, those are some of the artists I like and dislike. Anybody have another question for me? I'm sure there are more artists out there that I like. Oh, there's a Japanese artist who did woodblock block prints. Hokusai? Something like that. I like his stuff too. I also like Miyazaki. Studio Ghibli. Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro. Oh yeah. The art in those anime that he makes and his studio makes, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. All right, next question. Jennifer asks, do you listen to music while you make art? If so, what kind? Yes, I do. Never country western music. I do not appreciate it. As a white girl who grew up in the 80s, I don't listen to a lot of rap either. I don't listen to gospel music. I am not someone who follows the word of Christ, especially modernly. Hello. Put you guys back down here on the table. So I listen to my music that I like on my phone through an app that starts with a P and ends with a Dora. And I have a lot of kind of singers and standards music. So Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong. But I also have Maroon 5 and the Jonas Brothers, Taylor Swift, Sia. You know, a lot of modern pop music that kind of goes along in there. Glenn Miller, Count Basie. That's the kind of stuff I like. That's the stuff I listen to while I work. And it really calms me down, and it's better than having one thing repeat in my brain over and over and over and over and over again, like one little stanza. So there's a lot of interesting things that come on. I also, the Muse is also on there, and Imagine Dragons. So there's a lot of different things. So I can get Ella Fitzgerald followed by Imagine Dragons. And sometimes it takes a second for my brain to go, wait, really? Yeah. But I don't know if jumps around like that make my art any different than if I were just to listen to a whole Michael Bublé album all at once. I don't think it does. But it might. It might influence me. It might not. That's a really interesting question. Thank you for asking it. Do you have another question for me? And I have finished coloring in this piece. So here it is. So she says, this has been lovely. Thank you for your answers. I take it that she has no other questions for me. If anybody else is on and you have a question for me, please go ahead and ask it. I have been working on these mandalas instead of pour paintings right now. Well, I've kind of been doing both, honestly. But I've been taking an art marketing class and coloring in these mandalas while I listen to pre-recorded videos has been absolutely amazing, and I focus better on things when I have something to do with my hands. So coloring, I was always the kid in school who had doodles on the side of their homework and their notebooks and everything else. I covered my textbooks in brown paper so I could draw on those as well. But it gave me something that I could do with my hands. And I know there's been some recent studies that come out that say that people who doodle while they listen to something actually makes it adhere in their brains a little bit better for certain people. And I am one of those people. So that's why I've been creating so many of these little mandalas right now. and I'm enjoying learning, and I'm enjoying creating, and I'm enjoying doing both at the same time. And sometimes I focus on one and not the other. So it all works out. And then when I do have time to get away from the computer and the pre-recorded stuff, I go ahead and I make a pour painting and work on my main squeeze art. So that is going to be it for me tonight, I think. Thank you so much for joining me. Jennifer, thank you. And Diana, thank you for the lovely questions. And I hope to see you all again on Wednesday. Oh, Jennifer has another question, which is, how's my garden doing? My garden is doing fine. If you need another cucumber, let me know, because I have a couple more out there. I overplanted cucumbers this year, so I have made pickles, and we have eaten most of them, but the cucumbers kind of ran amok. And yes, okay. I'll see you Tuesday. You can have cucumber on Tuesday. And yeah, I've got to pull up the tomato plants and get things ready for winter and plant some winter stuff out there. Just have to have time to do it. So thank you for asking. And that's it for me. I am going to have another session of the Zen's Day Wednesday, where I just sit and I color or I make a painting and I let you guys watch, and I don't really talk and I don't answer questions, because I just want you to have that moment of quiet and zen, and I hope that helps when I do that. So that is going to be Wednesday, I think at 7 p.m. There is a post in this group, so go ahead and look for that post with the correct information. And I hope to see you Wednesday live back here with me. And that is it for tonight. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.